Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am NILAM and my group members, which is AFIFAH, Nurfadzira and AINI from class RCS 2483C, will present every chapter in PHI 454. Chapter 1: Introduction to the History and Philosophy of Science. Definition of History and Philosophy of Science. Philosophy of science is a subfield of philosophy concerned with the foundations, methods, and implications of science. The central questions of this study concern what qualifies as science, the reliability of scientific theories, and the ultimate purpose of science. This discipline overlaps with metaphysics, ontology, and epistemology. For example, when it explores the relationship between science and truth. Philosophy of science focuses on metaphysical, epistemic, and semantic aspects of science. Ethical issues such as bioethics and scientific misconduct are often considered ethics or science studies rather than philosophy of science. What is science? Science is not merely fact. Merely knowing that at a certain time of year, a certain bright star is just above the eastern horizon after sunset means that soon the Nile will flood is not science. The Babylonians and Egyptians, and indeed any agricultural civilization, must possess a great deal of scientific fact, but not science. What is science? Science, also known as natural philosophy, is characterized by organizing these facts, by organized skepticism, by eliminating personification of nature, by disprobability. Science is inherently at odds with organized religion. Science preaches disbelief, not faith, lack of respect for authority, and respect for the rationality of humanity. Religions attempt to suppress science and scientific thought because science forces religion to either die or change, and both are seen as unacceptable. The Greek world. Science begins in the Greek world with the rise of widespread literacy. The Greeks used an alphabetic writing system rather than a logographic system, like the Chinese or Egyptians, and this made learning to write significantly easier. It is widely accessible. Writing allows for the close and repeated examination of arguments and observations, permitting sources to be more easily uncovered. History of science. The first scientists, beginning with cells in the 6th century BCE, were from the city of Miletus. They began asking questions about mathematical generalizations and the fundamental nature of things. They did not invoke religious explanations. They not only state their theories, but attempted to provide a logical defense of them, introducing the idea of a proof. Science and philosophy did not have clear division at this time, and philosophers and scientists typically work in both fields. Classical Greek science did not proceed clearly, however. Socrates was actually put to death for his crime for his philosophical thoughts. Greek religion, despite efforts to resist philosophy and science, would eventually be forced to give way to rationalizing influence of science and philosophy. What is philosophy? How do we maximize right and maximize wrong? Or rather, how do we maximize science and maximize non-science? Just by asking these questions, we are asking philosophical questions. We are also answering what philosophy is. Philosophy is not there to solve practical problems of society or individual. Rather, philosophy tests our most fundamental disbeliefs, values, and convictions that we have, and to test them for the purpose of getting them right. This testing is in the form of asking critical questions, of debating, which is the central aspect of the philosophy. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. The love of getting to the right answer using debate, by Daniel Robinson, Georgetown University. What is philosophy of science? Understanding philosophy can be simplified by asking two simple questions, namely, first, what is good, what is bad? Second, what is right, what is wrong? The first question relates to human behavior, specifically for example, ideas on virtue, morals, and ethics. Broad statement, scientists are less interested in these. The second question relates specifically to ideas on logic and reason, and perception and reality. Broad statement, scientists are more interested in these. So, even though we can say that philosophy is not there to solve practical problems, it does not mean that we cannot use philosophical thought to help us solve scientific or practical problems. That's all for chapter 1. Definition of science. The state of knowledge. Knowledge as distinguished from ignorance or misunderstanding. It is a systematized body of knowledge based on observation and experimentation. It is a branch of such knowledge that deals with the phenomena of the universe and their laws. It is a particular branch of knowledge that is distinct from art. Scientific method. First, purpose or question. Ask a question. Second, research. Conduct background research. Third, hypothesis. Purpose. Propose a hypothesis. Fourth, experiment. Design and perform an experiment to test your hypothesis. Fifth, data or analysis. Record observation and analyze the meaning of the data. Lastly, conclusion. The inductive-deductive pattern of scientific inquiry. Inductive approach. A researcher begins by collecting data that is relevant to her topic of interest. Once a substantial amount of data has been collected, the researcher will then take a breather from data collection, stepping back to get a bird's eye view of their data. At this stage, the researcher looks for patterns in the data, working to develop a theory that could explain those patterns. Thus, researchers take an inductive approach. They start with a set of observations, and then they move from those particular experiences to a more general set of propositions about those experiences. In other words, they move from data to theory, or from the specific to the general. This is type of inductive approach. First, gather data, specific level of focus. Second, look for patterns, analyzing. Third, develop theory, general level of focus. Deductive approach. They start with a social theory that they find compelling and then test its implications with data. That is, they move from a more general level to a more specific one. A deductive approach to research is the one that people typically associate with scientific investigation. The researcher studies what others have done, reads existing theories of whatever phenomenon she is studying, and then tests hypotheses that emerge from those theories. These are steps of deductive approach. First, theorize or hypothesize, general level of focus. Second, analyze data, analyzing. Third, hypothesis supported or not, specific level of focus. Truth in science. Scientific truth is based on fact. Philosophy, religion, feelings, and prejudice have nothing to do with science. Only facts matter. Verified, reproducible facts are the bedrock of scientific truth. The facts are used to construct theories which describe the detailed relations among large numbers of facts and their origin from common roots. Each element of a theory corresponds to some part of nature, and in this sense, scientific theories describe nature. Assumptions of science. Nature is orderly, and the laws of nature describe that order. When we speak of the orderliness of nature, we speak in terms of regulatory pattern and structure. We can know nature. We assume that we can learn about nature and natural law through observing it. This might seem self-evident, but it isn't, until you make the logical assumption that you can learn about something by observing it. You can begin to reason about it. All phenomena have natural causes. We assume that nothing we see is unnatural. If it occurs within nature, then it is a natural occurrence. And if it's a natural occurrence, we assume that it obeys some natural law, and that by observing it, we can learn about it. Nothing is self-evident. The advancement of knowledge requires that we assume something we know could be wrong, and if that is the case, we should test it to see if it's true. Knowledge is derived from acquisition of experience, learning through observation. Knowledge is superior to ignorance. These are the basic assumptions science is based on. They're pretty common, sensible, and they've held true over the years, so we assume that they are a solid base to build on. After all, if those assumptions were untrue, then science itself could not have been successful in generating knowledge. Advantage and limitation of scientific method. Advantage. First, logical. It is based on empirical evidence. It is proof and verification. Second, objective. Reliable at finding the truth. Third, repeatable and refutable. Cautions. With theories that are backed up. Limitation. First, cannot test the topic beyond scientific methods. Scientific cannot prove or refute the existence of God or any other supernatural entity. Second, incapable of making value judgments or deal with phenomenon. It can study the causes and effects of global warming and report on those results, but it cannot assert that driving SUVs is wrong while it happens. Third, hampered by techniques and instruments. Fourth, cannot explain why things as they are. Lastly, not concerning metaphysics and value. Sign paradigm. What paradigm? Paradigm as a pattern or model, an exemplar. A pattern of thinking. What is science paradigm? The general theoretical assumptions and laws and techniques for their applications that their members of a particular scientific community are taught to adopt and set standard for the normal way in which inquiry is conducted. The set of practices that define a scientific discipline during a particular period of time. Example, how is an experiment to be conducted and what equipment is available to conduct the experiment. Normal science vs revolutionary science. The important distinction drawn by Kant 1962 between periods of stability of concepts and assumption in science and periods of upheaval and rapid change. Normal science. Kant sees normal science as usually involved in puzzle solving, which accepts and works entirely within the assumptions of a particular scientific paradigm. Thinking inside the box is analogous with thinking of normal science. In periods of normal science, scientific work is characterized by psychological and social conformity and group solidarity. Revolutionary science. Only when an established paradigm fails to generate new puzzles or is beset by major anomalies do exceptional scientists turn to revolutionary science, in which new paradigms are created. Thinking outside the box would be that Kuhn says revolutionary science. Examples of such revolutionary shifts cited by Kuhn are, first, the Copernican and Newtonian revolutions. Second, Dalton's new system in chemistry. Third, the work of Einstein. Scientific revolutions are like political revolutions and must struggle to overcome such conformity. When this occurs, there is no standard higher than the standard of the relevant community. Kuhn, 1977. That's all for Chapter 2.
Chapter 3: A Brief History of Science. Aristotelian geocentric worldview. Geocentric purpose in Aristotle's science. Aristotle's science is the most influential science in the West for 2000 years. This science holds to the geocentric understanding that the center of nature is the Earth. The Earth is stationary, not spinning around the Sun, and not spinning on its own axis rather than the Moon, the planets, and the Sun circling the Earth 24 hours a day. The order of the entries are Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and fixed star. Beyond that are prima mobile, sublunar and superlunar limb. Nature, according to Aristotle's understanding, is divided into two spheres, which are sublunar and superlunar. The sublunar environment is between the Earth and the Moon but excludes the Moon. The superlative spheres are from the Moon and above. There are four basic elements in sublunar, which are land, water, air, and fire. These elements have their own natural properties. Law of motion. The law of motion discusses the environment in sublunar and superlunar. In the sublunar, a moving object will eventually stop and a stationary object will remain stationary unless an external source moves it. In the superlative, something moving like the Moon, the Sun, and the planet will never stop. Superlunar has sublunar. Everything in the sublunar, including the four elements, is immutable and changeable. Because of the nature of this thing is changing and not permanent, it is considered imperfect. Superlunar is permanent and unchanged. It is considered perfect. So, the perfect will affect the imperfect. Aristotelian view of the universe and Christian theology. Aristotelian worldviews and Christian theology had become tightly merged. The Church preferred earth-centered geocentric view. The Christian scriptures Bible suggests that the earth is stationary, sun moves around the earth. The scientific revolution. The scientific revolution in heliocentric. Copernicus' book on the revolution of the celestial spheres 1500 introduced a new system of astronomy, which is heliocentric sun-centered system. Sun is as the center of the universe. Neoplatonism. Neoplatonism is a Christianized version of Plato 400 BC philosophy. Plato always used the sun as his metaphor for the good. In Neoplatonism, sun metaphor for the good now represent God. The Copernicus sun-centered system had been used and taught for 70 years. The Catholic Church had no problem with this new system as long as the system was taken with an instrumentalist attitude hypothesis. Bruno's Infinite Universe 1584. The universe is infinite. God does not create the world. He was against both Catholic and Protestant Christianity. He was finally arrested, tried to, and convicted heresy and burned alive in 1600. Kepler 1600 conceived the Earth as gigantic magnet. If the Earth can display such magnetic power, so can the Sun. The force keeping the planets in orbit might be the Sun's magnetism. The planet move in elliptical orbits around the Sun. Galileo evidence from telescope 1610. There are many evidence from the telescope. One of it is mountain on the moon. Using telescope, Galileo observed that the moon is a large rocky body similar to the Earth. The moon's surface is not smooth and uniform. She showed that the Asians were wrong in their description of the moon. The moon is not the perfect body they pictured. Aristotelian view of the universe and Christian theology. Under the influence of St. Augustine, Europeans believed that this world is evil and that it signifies suffering because of the first sin. For them, not this world but the empyrean heaven was important since God and paradise existed there. Reception of Galileo's discoveries. Galileo versus Cardinal Bellarmine. Galileo viewed the scripture is undeniably correct when it comes to matter involving salvation, but Bellarmine viewed that all aspects of scripture are undeniably correct. Rejection of Aristotelian worldview. Conception of God change. God is viewed as a watchmaker God. Rejection of Aristotelian hierarchical outlook. Every object has a natural place in the universe. People had natural places in the overall order of things. For example, the divine right of things. Newtonian worldview and the new science. Newton's science. Newton's science is a product of a great deal of work over a number of decades, and it reached its culmination in the work of Isaac Newton. Newtonian science, it consists of three laws of motion and principle of universal gravitation. Law 1. Principle of inertia. Law 2. The change in motion of an object is proportional to the force applied to the object. Law 3. To any action, there is always an opposite and equal reaction. Newton's science. Universal gravitation. This force, F, keeps the planets in the orbits around the Sun, holds satellites in their orbit, and causing falling objects to descend. Mechanistic explanation versus theological explanation. Theological explanation is any explanation that is given in terms of a goal or purpose or function to be fulfilled. The universe was viewed as a theological and universe, full of natural goals and purpose. The job of a natural scientist is to understand the theological and essential natures of objects, which explains why objects behave as they do. Mechanistic explanation versus theological explanation. Mechanistic explanation is an explanation that is not given in terms of goals or purpose or function. All natural phenomena could be explained mechanistically. Universe is viewed as a mechanical universe like a big machine. 1700 to 1900, development of Newtonian worldview. By 1900, most of the major questions about the world had been answered within a Newtonian framework. Chemistry, for example, by 1800, Dalton formulated his atomic theory in Newtonian framework. Biology, before 1600, biological vitalist. Living things are different from non-living things. Hence, Newtonian laws cannot be applied to living things. By early 20th century, biology, chemistry, and physics were united and viewed as investigating the same Newtonian world, although at different levels.
Chapter 4 Epistemology. Epistemological definition of knowledge. Epistemology is known as theory of knowledge. It is investigate the nature, source, limitation, and validity of knowledge. Knowledge or ilmu is derived from the root word NILAM, derived from the word alamah, meaning a mark, sign, or token by which a thing or person is known. There is two types. First is illuminative knowledge, second is science. Wisdom is combination of illuminative knowledge and science. The concept of meaning, source, arrival, and system. Definition of knowledge according to Ahmad. Firstly, knowledge comes from God. Knowledge is defined as the arrival of meaning of a thing in the soul, or the soul arrival at the meaning of that thing. Man is both body and soul. Soul has four different modes, such as intellect, soul, heart, or spirit. Things such as words, pen, computer, and others. Meaning is the recognition of the place of anything in a system. For example, computer system, place of mouse in a computer system. First, connect mouse to mousepad is meaningful. Second, connect mouse to printer port is meaningless. System from grid. A system in any collection of interrelated parts where a change in one part will affect some or of the other part. A system is often seen to be purposeful or functional in that it is easy to identify some objective or goal. Four sources and methods of knowledge. First is sound sense. There is 5 external sense and 5 internal sense. External sense such as touch, taste, smell, sight, and hear. Internal sense is common sense, representative faculty, estimation faculty, memory and recollection faculty, and lastly imagination faculty. Second is sound reason. Human thinking on certain matter is often not correct or based on wrong premise, or on wrong calculation even from right premise. Premise is the statement presented in an argument as reason for accepting the conclusion. Example: correct premise, wrong conclusion. First, correct premise: there is more women than male students at the university. Wrong conclusion: female students are better than men. Second, correct premise: Jamiah Islamiyah bom Bali. Wrong conclusion: Islam is a religion of violence. Example: wrong premise is Malay people do not have the history in mathematics. Wrong conclusion: Malays are weak in math. Second, wrong premise: knowledge is information. Wrong conclusion: because of computer allow access more information, then students should be exposed to computer and the internet to get more knowledge. More information means more knowledge. Third, true report. There is two kinds of true report. First, report which is established in a continuous sequence by people whose ethical integrity is well known. The algorithm cannot imagine they would conquer and spread falsehood. Second, revelation brought by prophet which is absolute. And lastly is intuition. Different kind and level of intuition, the lowest being that which is experienced by scientists and scholars in their creative discovery, the highest being that explained by prophet. Definition of true knowledge. There is a limit of truth in every object of knowledge, and every object of knowledge has a different limit of truth. Example, knowledge of math is more difficult than knowledge of a chair. Wisdom, adab, and justice. Wisdom is endowed to man by God through spiritual unveiling or intuition or spiritual testing to enable its possessor to know the practical boundary and meaningful limit of matter and specialized knowledge and thereby act justly. Adab in the context of Arabia refer to prescribed Islamic etiquette, refinement, good manners, moral decorum, decency, humaneness. Justice implies knowledge of the right and proper place for a thing or a being to be, of right as against wrong, of the mean of limit, of spiritual gain as against loss, of truth as against falsehood. Certainty and doubt. Doubt is a wavering between two opposites without the one preponderating over the other. If one inclines more toward the one and not toward the other while yet not rejecting the other, it is conjecture. If he affirms the one and rejects the other, then he has attained certainty. Yakin is contrary of doubt and conjecture. The Quran mentions three degrees of certainty in knowledge. First is that which is derived by inference, whether deductive or inductive. Second, that which is derived by observation or derivation. Third, that which is derived by direct experience.
Chapter 5 Philosophy. Four branches of philosophy is ontology, axiology, epistemology, and logic. The first is ontology. Ontology is a branch of philosophy that studies the nature of human being existence as individuals, society, and universe. Metaphysics, also known as ontology. Meta, beyond or above. Meta plus physics is what's come after physics, what lies beyond nature. They deal with the most fundamental concept, reality, existence, substance, and causality. The examples is appearance and reality. Does God exist? Do I have soul? Are angels real? So the next is epistemology, known as theory of knowledge, a branch of philosophy that investigates the nature, sources, limitation, and validity of knowledge. What is knowledge? How do human beings acquire knowledge? Limits of human knowledge. The next is axiology, theory of value including both moral and aesthetic values. Moral, what is morality? What is good? What is bad? What is morally permissible or impermissible? Aesthetic, what is beauty? What makes an object a work of art? Next is logic, synonym to reasoning or argument. For example is I disagree with his logic. I reject his reasoning. The whole purpose of reasoning of logic is to arrive at the truth. Ancient Greeks originates Western logical thought. Their works sum up in Aristotle's treatise on logic. They relied on language to explain what they are doing. Further advances in logic begin in 19th century invented by Gottlob Frege. So the next is empiricism versus rationalism. Empiricism is an epistemological standpoint that states that experience and observation should be the means of gaining knowledge. Rationalism is a philosophical standpoint that believes that opinions and actions should be based on reason rather than on religious belief or emotion. Main sources of knowledge for empiricism is sensory experience, and rationalism is mind or intellect or reason. The aspects for views on God for empiricism is an empiricist would say that one cannot have the knowledge about God by reason. Empiricism believes that all kinds of knowledge related to existence can be derived only from experience. And for rationalism is the rationalist would say that one can get the knowledge of God by mere reason. Aspect for teachings is for empiricism teach that we should not try to know substantive truth about God and the soul from reason, and empiricists would recommend two projects, namely constructive and critical. And for rationalism, rationalism would ask to follow pure reason. An aspect for intuition for empiricism does not believe in intuition, and for rationalism believe in intuition. Logical positivism, later called logical empiricism, and both of which together are also known as neo-positivism, was a movement in Western philosophy whose central thesis was the verification principle, also known as the verifiability criterion of meaning. This would be theory of knowledge asserted that only statements verifiable through direct observation or logical proof are meaningful. Starting in the late 1920s, group of philosophers, scientists, and mathematicians formed the Berlin Circle and the Vienna Circle, which in these two cities would propound the ideas of logical positivism. For scientism, The belief that the methods of the natural science are applicable in all inquiry, especially in human and social science. Scientific description of reality is the only truth there is. With the advances of science, there have been a tendency to slip into scientism and assume that any claim can be authenticated if the term scientific is used to describe it. The belief that science is the only method for obtaining knowledge. The next is skepticism. Doubt whether it is possible to attain perfect certainty of knowledge. Nothing can be known with certainty. That at best there can only be some private, probable opinion. For example, is hygiene hypothesis in allergies a medical mystery? Is it too much cleanliness of environmental pollutants? Someone who suffered a parasitic wound. So phenomenalism. Phenomenalism is a view in epistemology and philosophy of perception that physical objects do not exist as things in themselves but only as perceptual phenomena of bundle of sense data situated in time and in space. Empiricism is the theory that the origin of all knowledge is sense experience. It emphasizes the role of experiments and evidence, especially sensory perception, in the formation of ideas, and argues that the only knowledge human can have in a posteriori based on experience. For the example is a table appears to be solid. In reality, it is in state of continuous flux. The life duration of a table does not last 2 atoms of time because they are constantly perishing. In science, we can only know what appears to us, what we can observe, the thing as it is, the reality of the things we cannot know. Occam's Razor's law of parsimony. William of Occam, known as a law of parsimony or law of economy. In simpler language, Occam Razor states that the simplest explanation is preferable to one that is more complex. Simple theories are easier to verify. Simple solutions are easier to execute. For example is a ball at the top of hill will roll down in order to be at the point of minimum potential energy. The same principle is present in biology. If a person repeats the same action on a regular basis in response to the same clue or and reward, it will become a habit as a responding neural pathway informed. From then on, their brain will use less energy to complete the same action. Materialism. Materialism can refer either to the simple preoccupation with the material world as opposed to intellectual or spiritual concept, or to the theory that physical matter is all there is. This theory is far more a simple focus on material possession. It states that everything in the universe is matter without any true spiritual or intellectual existence. Materialism can also refer to a doctrine that material success and progress are the highest values in life. The next is idealism. Idealism in philosophy, any view that stresses the central role of the ideal or the spiritual in the interpretation of experience. It may hold that the world or reality exists essentially as spirit or consciousness, that abstraction and law are more fundamental in reality than sensory things, or at least that whenever exists is not in dimension that are chiefly mental, true, and as ideas. Theory of truth in Western philosophy. There are three theories. First is correspondence theory. True belief corresponds to the fact. A true belief is that the belief corresponds to reality. A false belief is that the belief fails to correspond to reality. For example, is true belief. This is a car. Coherent theory. A true belief is that the belief coheres with or ties in with other belief. Individual coherence theory. Truth is relative to the individual in question. For example, is Kurt. Group coherent theory. A belief is true to if it fits in with the collective belief of the group. For example, is Kurt in TV3. The third, the third is pragmatic theory. True beliefs are those which work or useful if accepting it brings success. For businesses, Islamic banking system practiced by Citibank. The next is pragmatism. Pragmatism is a method of philosophizing, often identified as a theory of meaning first stated by Charles Peirce in the 1870s. Revived primarily as a theory of truth in 1998 by William James, and further developed, expanded, and disseminated by John Dewey. The last is Socratic method. He establishes dialectic, the method of seeking truth by a process of question and answer. He established the method of trying to get at truth by persistent questioning. Socrates was known as the masterly integrator.